Hey everybody, it's Lindsay and I'm here today to show you how you can add some hand drawing to your cards to create a scene. So I'm using a digital stamp today, and this is the Pondering Fairy digital stamp from DigiStamps for Joy. And this is for the challenge over on the blog this month, and the optional add-on little twist is to add a fairy. So this is the one I chose to add. Now all I did was take it and put it on a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch panel, and I printed it off onto some white cardstock with my laser printer. That's all I've done so far, and then I slightly trimmed it down and taped it to a hard board. Now I am just going to go ahead and outline all of my lines of this stamp with the micron pen, because I'm going to come in watercolor, and I just wanted my lines a little bit darker. And when I go in to draw on this cardstock, I want everything to match. So I want all the inks to match. So I just went ahead and outlined the image, and it doesn't take long. It's really pretty easy and pretty quick to do. So I went ahead and I took my Tim Holtz ruler, and using my crop marks that my printer had printed off with this, I just outlined where my card panel was going to be so I knew where to draw in my images. Now whenever I use digital stamps, sometimes I want to make a scene with them. However, I do not have a pad like that hooks into your computer that you can draw with. So I decided to go ahead and print this out, traced over all the images that printed out, and then I thought I would try and draw in a scene. Now you do not need to be artistic for this. I'm not very much at all, and I was able to draw in a complete scene. So I mean, it's really just about trying and actually just doing it. If you don't like something, you're starting with a pencil, so you can always go back and erase it. Or because this is a digital stamp, you can go back in and you can reprint and you can start all over. And really, your images don't have to be perfect here. Your main focal point is going to be, mine right now is going to be the fairy that I printed off. So whatever you printed off is going to be your main focal point. You're just making a background image. So it doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be exact. And just to give an impression, when you give an impression of something, the eye automatically looks at that and goes, oh, that's a tree or that's a bush. So it doesn't need to be perfect. So I'm just drawing in. I drew a lane and I started at a horizon line that I had drawn. And I just drew out, not straight lines, because if you look at a road, it comes to a point in the distance. So I drew it like that. I drew in some bushes on both sides, and I also drew in a tree on one side, and then a tree, just the base of the tree, a trunk of the tree on the other side. And then I also put a tree off in the distance in the background, and that's all I drew in. The rest of it is just going to come with painting and adding layers of watercolor, because I am going to come in and watercolor this with some distress inks. So once I had all of my images sketched out with a pencil, I came back in with the same micron pen I had used before, and I'm just going to trace over all of my sketch lines that I have made. Now whenever you do use your micron pen, you just want to make sure that you use one that is the same width that your stamp is, your digital stamp, just because you want all of your lines to match up on your scene. And whenever you use this and you start drawing in and you follow your pencil lines, you just want to make sure that unless you're going for a sketchy look, just draw with confidence is the best thing I could say. You've got to go for it. And if you mess up, like I said, you can just start over. It's just a piece of paper. It's just some printer ink. It's not a big deal if you mess up and you need to start over. Like I said before, I am no artist. I can draw just a little tiny bit, but I was able to create this whole scene just by sketching it out and then just going over my lines once I was happy with it and just adding in details. If you need to, you can always look up, pictures on Google that people have drawn and just kind of try and follow their lines that they've made in their scenes, and that could really help too. So I'm just going to continue to draw all this in, and I just want to make sure that I keep my little fairy that I've already went over my main focal point. So I just want to kind of stay back from that and keep all of my images behind it, so no lines in front of her. I'm just going to finish off this tree and the other one on this side, and then I will move on to some watercoloring. Now, I did use my laser printer to print. I will link it over on my blog if you want to check out which one I use. I use it for all my printing and all my foiling and all that kind of stuff, and it does really well with watercolor. Now, I did send watercolor paper through my printer, but watercolor by nature is a thicker paper, so you just want to make sure that your printer can handle it. Some can't, and you're going to get a jam that way, and you don't want to ruin your printer. So just make sure, follow your printer's directions and make sure that it can handle it. Like I said, mine did, and if you're interested in that, I will leave it linked on my blog, and it goes on sale quite often at Best Buy, and I was able to get it on sale, I believe, for around $50. And my toner that I got with it is still going strong, and I print a lot, so it's doing much better than my inkjets did. So once I had my image all drawn in, I'm just going to take an eraser, any kind will do, and I'm just going to go ahead and erase all of my pencil lines, but I want to go ahead and leave that outline that I drew in with my ruler just to know where I need color on my cardstock. I want my panel that I've drawn here, I want it to fill an entire A2 card front. So I'll just leave those pencil lines there so I know where I can go ahead and stop my color. Now, I thought the sky looked a little bit plain, so I went ahead and drew in a tree. I didn't sketch this one out, but it was small enough I really didn't need to. But another thing you want to remember when you're drawing your scene is as you look further, your objects that you're looking at get smaller. So the tree that's further in the background is going to be smaller than the one that's in front. So just another rule to keep in mind, I guess you could say. But again, Google a picture and then you'll get more of a sense of what you want to draw and how you want to draw it. So I'm just going to take that micron pen. You can darken up any lines you think need a little darkening and go back in and fix any items that you do want to fix. And because this pen is waterproof, after your watercolor is dry and you want to go back in and you want to add any little details that maybe you forgot, you can go ahead and come back in with that pen again and do it right on top of the watercolor. Now, for all of my watercoloring, I'm using Distress inks, and I will have, again, all the colors will be listed over on my blog. I won't list them here on YouTube. I don't do link lists on YouTube. I do one on my blog, and I'm not going to do two. So they're kind of a pain. So if you want to check out all the supplies I used, you can head over there. Now, I only have about 3 different colors of Distress ink. So what I did was I'm going to mix up some colors. So on some of them I'm adding some browns. You can add some antique linen to kind of lighten them. You can add some yellow to really make some of these bushes more yellow of a bush. And it just really helps whenever you have a lot of green like I do on this card. It really helps to just add variations to your different colors of green as you go along. I'm also using antique linen on that path that I made, and I will come back in again with some darker colors. So that's another thing you do want to remember whenever you're doing this. It's okay to come back in and layer up colors like I'm doing here. I put on 1 layer of brown for all of my tree trunks, but then I'm coming back in with a lot less water and more concentrated color, and I'm just going to go over those lines that I made that is the faux wood grain, and that really just gives the tree a little bit more life. Now on my path, I came back in with a darker brown, and I'm not going to completely cover it. I just want to dot here and there and kind of let the color work its way out so it's nice and organic looking like a real path is. So for my little fairy, I made her a blonde-haired fairy. Her dress is pink because I can't do a card without pink on it, I guess. And then I'm also going to do some purple. Now I wanted her wings to look really transparent. So I came in and I thought about using some red on it. I didn't end up using it. I just used some peacock feathers and some black soot. But when I came in with this, I added a lot of water just so I would get an intense color, but at the same time I wanted it really transparent so it wasn't covering up any of those lines on her wings, because if you look at any wings, they are more transparent. So again, just wanted to keep it more realistic looking. Now I just added a nice shade of Salty Ocean, a nice wash of that for my sky, and then that finished off my watercolor for this panel. The only thing I had left to do are those little swirls that come out from the ferry, but I wanted to add some shine to those, and I thought about stickles, but then I had just used Perfect Pearls on the last card that I had done, so I went ahead and grabbed out my gold. I added just a tiny touch of water to this gold Perfect Pearls, so it's really a nice thick concentrated formula, and I mixed it up with a watercolor brush, and then I'm just going to dot this color into those little circles. Now the great thing about this is whenever you put water with Perfect Pearls, that's what sets it. So once I put this down and it dries, it's not going to move anymore, it's not going to flake off, and you'll see here in a moment. I go ahead and heat set this and make sure everything's nice and dry, and then I can put my finger and kind of rub it over the Perfect Pearls, but there is absolutely no transfer because I did use that water, and that's what's really just going to hold that together. So once this was completely dry and everything, I went ahead and set it aside for a minute. I did trim it out using my crop marks that I had made before, so it was ready to go on a card panel. And again, I kept that at 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, full card size panel there. So I didn't want to cover up any of this watercolor that I had done, so I decided to add my sentiment with vellum. I could have just left it blank and not added a sentiment, but I find when cards are in my stash and I don't end up adding a sentiment, I reach for the ones with my sentiment first, because when I want a card, I need it pretty quickly the majority of the time, so I don't have time to really go in my craft room and stamp out a sentiment on a card every time I need one. So when I have a sentiment ready to go on it, it just makes it a lot easier. So I just stamped out a sentiment from the Avery L Peony stamp set, and I just stamped that on a piece of vellum that was 1 inch wide that I had made, and then I'm just going to tuck that around the card panel so you can still see through it, still see all that watercolor I did, but I do have a sentiment on there ready to go. So I just wrapped that panel around there, and I already had double-sided adhesive on there, so it just stuck down very nicely. Then I added a little bit more, and I just popped that onto an A2 top folding white card base, and that finished my card. I hope I've inspired you to try drawing on a scene of your own, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, I will leave you with just a few pictures. For the supply list, you can head on over to my blog, craftingwhilecaffeinated.wordpress.com. The link is in the description box below, as well as that I in the top right hand corner. That will get you there too. Thank you guys so much for watching, and happy crafting!